Hi guys! Tonight we're stepping into the long, smoky story of coal, the black rock that waited underground for millions of years, then rose into human hands and quietly changed almost everything. Imagine a cold night, a low fire, and a stone that should not burn but somehow does, glowing red like a buried sunset. What kind of world notices such a thing? Who first picked it up, turned it over, and thought, well, this ugly little lump might be useful? So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what your local time is right now. Because somewhere, someone is hearing this in a dark room while another person is watching dawn arrive. Coal has travelled through both. It has warmed hands, blackened walls, powered engines, and made fortunes that smelled faintly of smoke. Now, dim the lights. You stand at the edge of a world before chimneys, before railway whistles, before factory bells begin bossing everybody around like tin little tyrants. The air is cooler here and quieter. You're not in the Industrial Revolution yet, not even close. You're much farther back, in a landscape where people know the moods of wood, the patience of fire, and the ordinary labour of staying warm. Under your feet, hidden below moss, clay, and stone, coal is already there. It is not new. It is ancient beyond easy imagining. Long before any hand gathers it, coal begins as dead plant matter in swampy forests, buried under water, mud, and pressure. Over immense stretches of time, those plants are squeezed, heated, and changed into peat, then lignite, then harder forms of coal. You're walking over the remains of vanished forests so old that no bird ever sang in them, because birds had not yet appeared. Ferns, club mosses, and towering prehistoric plants once grew in thick, humid lowlands, rising in green tangles beneath strange skies. Their fallen bodies became the dark seams that later humans would cut open. It is a humbling thought, really. You warm your hands over a fire, and the heat touching your skin may have begun as sunlight trapped hundreds of millions of years ago. A bit dramatic, yes, but coal has always had a talent for drama, even lying silently underground. It is basically a fossilized thundercloud waiting for someone to make a decision. Now you are in the ancient world, where people live close to the ground and notice useful oddities. A stone that burns is not something one easily forgets. At first, coal is likely gathered where seams appear at the surface, along cliffs, stream beds, eroded hillsides, and places where black bands show themselves without needing a miner's pick. You bend down and lift a lump. It feels dusty and cool. It leaves a smudge on your fingers. It is not beautiful like polished amber or useful looking like flint. It is dull, brittle, and slightly messy, which is an honest description of many important things in history. When placed in flame, it catches slowly. Then it holds heat. It smells sharper than wood, more mineral, more stubborn. The smoke is thick and unpleasant. It clings to hair, wool, and thatch. You can almost taste it at the back of your throat, a bitter dryness that makes you swallow. But the heat lasts. For people who spend their lives feeding fires, that matters. One mainstream historical fact sits solidly here. Coal was known and used in parts of the ancient world, including Roman Britain, where archaeological evidence shows coal appearing in domestic heating, metalworking, and military sites. The Romans did not build a coal-powered civilization, not in the later industrial sense, but they noticed it, gathered it, traded it in small amounts, and used it where it made sense. You can picture a Roman soldier at a chilly northern outpost, unimpressed by the weather, possibly judging everyone, warming himself beside a smoky coal fire while damp wind pushes at the walls. The sound around you is not the roar of industry. It is the snap of a small hearth, the soft drag of sandals or leather shoes on packed earth, the scrape of a pot, the hiss when damp fuel meets heat. Coal enters life quietly. It does not arrive with a parade. It slips into kitchens, workshops, bathhouses, and smithies as one more material among many. Wood remains familiar. Charcoal is cleaner for many kinds of metalwork. But coal is there, an alternative, especially in places where it is easy to find. You walk through a Roman settlement in Britain. The sky is low and pale. Rain beads on rough stone. The smell of wet wool mingles with smoke. Somewhere nearby, a smith works metal, his hammer striking in a rhythm that feels almost sleepy from a distance. At the edge of the settlement, black fragments lie in a basket. They look like broken pieces of night. A hand reaches in, takes one, and places it near the fire. The flame licks uncertainly, then deepens. The room warms by degrees. Not everyone would have loved it. Coal smoke can be harsh. In enclosed spaces it makes the air heavy. Soot darkens surfaces and settles into cracks. You run a finger along a beam and it comes away grey-black. The fire gives, but it also takes. That exchange will follow coal for the rest of its long human career: warmth in return for dirt, power in return for consequence. And yet, in these early moments, coal is still local, modest, and a little mysterious. Historians still argue whether ancient communities saw coal as an important fuel in its own right, or mostly as an occasional substitute when wood or charcoal was inconvenient. The evidence survives unevenly. A scatter of burnt coal here, a written mention there, a workshop floor darkened by use, a Roman villa with traces in the hearth. The past is not a tidy filing cabinet, which is rude of it, honestly. It gives fragments, and then waits for patient people to argue over them. You move farther east in imagination, into ancient China, where coal was also known and used early. Chinese sources and archaeological findings suggest that coal became part of heating and industrial practices, in some regions long before Europe's great age of steam. In places with cold winters and accessible seams, the appeal is clear. You enter a room where the floor is hard beneath your feet, the winter air pressing against the door. A brazier glows. The scent is earthy and smoky. Outside, the world is frozen into silence, but inside, the heat gathers close around your knees. Coal's early usefulness often depends on geography. Where trees are abundant, wood feels natural and renewable, at least while populations remain small enough and forests forgiving enough. Where forests thin, where cold bites hard, or where coal lies near the surface, this black rock becomes more tempting. You are watching a slow relationship form, not a revolution. Humans do not yet belong to coal. They merely borrow from it. There is a quirky old belief that coal, jet, and other black stones carried protective or magical qualities. Jet, which is a hard form of lignite, was carved into ornaments in ancient and later societies, sometimes worn for beauty, mourning, or protection. Imagine someone holding a polished black amulet against the skin, smooth and cool at first, then warmed by the body. Is it fuel, jewelry, charm? A little of each, depending on who is holding it. History enjoys these blurred edges. One person burns a black stone for heat. Another wears a cousin of it around the neck to keep away misfortune. Practicality and superstition sit beside each other by the same fire, pretending not to share a bench. As you travel through early human encounters with coal, you notice that the material asks for adaptation. Wood fires breathe differently. Charcoal behaves with a familiar cleanliness. Coal demands patience. It may smoke badly before it burns well. It may need a hotter start. It may produce clinker and ash that must be cleared away. It rewards those who learn its habits. A household or craftsman has to understand air, draft, placement, and timing. Coal is not just a thing. It is a relationship with combustion. You stand beside a shoreline where dark lumps wash loose from exposed seams. Waves push and pull with a slow, shushing sound. The coal is wet, glistening under a grey sky. It looks almost soft until you touch it. Your fingers feel the grit. A gull cries overhead. Someone gathers the pieces into a sack. The sack grows heavy, tugging at the shoulder. This is not mining yet, not in the deep and organized way that will come later. This is scavenging from the earth's open pockets, taking what erosion has already offered. In another place, you see shallow digging. A bank is cut back. People pry out black layers with simple tools. The work is muddy, awkward, and close to the surface. There is no grand machinery, no engineered shaft, no steam pump groaning in the dark, just human backs, simple baskets, and the smell of damp soil. The coal breaks unevenly. Some pieces crumble, some hold. Every useful lump must be carried. The atmosphere is intimate. Coal is not yet a symbol of modernity. It is not yet tied to railways, steel bridges, crowded mills, or the clockwork discipline of factory life. It is just another answer to an old problem. How do you keep cold away? Cook food, shape metal, and survive when the weather is not in a generous mood. That old problem is easy to underestimate from a comfortable room, but step into a winter settlement without modern heating, and comfort becomes work. You feel the chill in your fingers first, then in your toes, breath clouds in the air. A child draws closer to the hearth. Someone shifts a pot over the heat. Someone else counts the remaining fuel with the quiet seriousness of a person counting coins. A fire is not decoration. It is security. Coal, when available, adds one more possibility. Still, coal remains limited by transport. A heavy fuel is only useful if it can be moved without absurd effort. In the ancient and early medieval worlds, roads, rivers, pack animals, carts, and boats decide what materials can travel. Coal is dense, dirty, and burdensome. Carry it far over poor roads and its advantage shrinks. So its early story is patchy. It appears in regions, trades, and households near sources, then fades where wood remains easier. You can sense the future resting inside this inconvenience. Coal's great age will need more than discovery. It will need growing towns, hungry industries, strained forests, better transport, deeper mines, pumps, capital, workers, and a world ready to tolerate smoke in exchange for power. For now, though, the black rock waits in small fires, in baskets, in shallow pits, in the hands of people who do not yet know what it will become. The fire in front of you settles into a low red glow. The room is dim. Soot has feathered the stones around the hearth. The smell is sharp but warming, unpleasant and comforting at the same time, which is very coal of it. You sit close enough to feel heat on your palms, while your back remains cool. Outside, the older world continues at its slower pace. Oxen shift in the dark. Rain taps lightly on a roof. Somewhere underground, whole buried forests lie in silence, not rushing, not announcing themselves, simply waiting for the centuries when human need will grow large enough to wake them. For now, coal is a curiosity, a useful nuisance, a black stone with a secret. It has not yet powered an empire of machines. It has not yet filled valleys with smoke or turned night into working time. It is only beginning to enter the human story, one hearth, one workshop, one cold hand at a time, and as you watch the ember pulse, you understand why people kept returning to it. The rock burned, the heat lasted. In a world where warmth meant survival, that was enough. You enter a medieval town under a low wool-grey sky, where the morning feels damp enough to sit on your shoulders. The streets are narrow, the houses lean inward, and the roofs almost seem to whisper secrets across the lane. Beneath your shoes, the ground is not a clean road so much as a pressed mixture of mud, straw, ash, and whatever the town has decided not to discuss politely. A cart creaks past with a patient horse pulling at its harness. Somewhere, a bell rings from a church tower, soft at first, then trembling through the mist. The town wakes slowly, with coughing chimneys and stiff fingers. Fire is already alive inside kitchens, bakeries, brewhouses, bathhouses, and workshops. In this place, warmth is not a luxury. It is a daily negotiation, and coal is beginning to make itself impossible to ignore. You feel its presence before you see it. There is a harsh smell in the air, thicker than wood smoke, more bitter, with a mineral edge that settles at the back of your throat. It curls from low chimneys and open hearths, sinking into wool cloaks and hanging over lanes where market sellers arrange their goods. Fish, onions, wet leather, horse sweat, tallow candles, and coal smoke all mingle together in one medieval perfume. Not exactly a luxury candle scent, unless the candle maker has lost all hope. Yet the people keep moving through it. They haggle. They carry baskets. They step around puddles. They warm their hands over fires that burn longer than wood and complain about the smoke while quietly buying more of the thing that makes it. Coal in medieval life is often called sea coal in England, especially when it reaches London by boat from coastal areas and northern coalfields. The name is charming, almost poetic, as though the sea has offered up black treasure. In truth, it is mostly a transport label, because ships and coastal trade help move the heavy fuel to markets where carts alone would make the whole business miserable. You stand near a wharf and hear ropes groan, gulls shriek, and men shout over the slap of water against timber. Baskets of black lumps are unloaded from vessels, leaving dust on hands, sleeves, and dock planks. The coal looks humble, but its journey already hints at something important. Fuel is becoming a commercial network. Wood still rules many hearths. It is familiar, easier to light, and smells sweeter. Charcoal remains prized by many metal workers because it burns cleaner and can produce intense heat without the same choking smoke. But forests around growing towns are under pressure. People need timber for building, fencing, tools, ships, barrels, carts, furniture, and firewood. A tree can only be used once, which is deeply inconsiderate of trees from the point of view of a crowded city. As nearby woods thin or become more carefully controlled, fuel prices rise. The poor feel this first. The baker feels it. The brewer feels it. Anyone with a furnace, kiln, oven, or warm room feels it. You pass a baker's shop where heat presses against the doorway like an invisible wall. Inside, loaves darken in an oven, and the baker's face shines with sweat despite the cold outside. The fire must be constant, the temperature watched, the fuel counted. Coal can be awkward, dirty, and smoky, but it offers endurance. Once properly kindled, it holds heat in a way that tempts practical people. The baker may grumble, and the neighbours may grumble louder, but a long-burning fire is persuasive. History often turns not on grand speeches, but on someone asking, "What keeps the oven hot without ruining me?" A mainstream fact becomes clear in the smoke by the later medieval period. Coal use expanded in parts of Britain, especially in towns and industries where wood grew costly, and coal could be shipped or carted from accessible fields. London's appetite is especially famous. Complaints about coal smoke appear in medieval records, and in the early 14th century, royal authority took notice of the nuisance caused by sea coal. The concern was not climate change in the modern sense. It was immediate and physical. Smoke-irritated eyes, dirtied walls, fouled air, and made wealthy noses extremely unhappy, which has always been a powerful force in public policy. You walk deeper into the town and the air changes from lane to lane. Near a carpenter's yard, you smell fresh shavings, resin, and sawdust. Near a smithy, the world becomes hotter, metallic, and loud. Hammer blows ring through the street in bright, repeated notes. Sparks rise and die. The smith's hands are rough, his apron marked by burns. Coal is not always welcomed here, because different crafts need different flames. Some trades adapt, Others resist. Some use coal directly. Others still depend on charcoal. The choice is not simply old versus new. It is a careful balancing of cost, availability, heat, smoke, and habit. Medieval people are not foolish about pollution. They may not use your vocabulary, but they know bad air when it scratches their throats. They know soot when it stains plaster. They know a headache after sitting too long near a smoky fire. In wealthy houses, where comfort is part of status, coal can seem unpleasantly vulgar. In poorer rooms, where winter drafts creep through gaps in the walls, the same fuel can seem like mercy. You step into a small dwelling where the hearth glows low. The floor is packed earth. A child leans close to the warmth. The smoke slips upward, not as neatly as anyone would like, and leaves a dark bloom above the fire. The heat touches your palms, while the air remains sharp in your lungs. Researchers still debate whether medieval complaints about coal smoke reflect widespread public health distress, elite discomfort, or the special visibility of smoke near royal and civic spaces. The surviving records can be uneven and biased. Officials wrote things down when something bothered people with influence. Quiet suffering in poorer quarters did not always earn beautiful handwriting in a municipal book. So you listen carefully to the silences. The smoke in the lane belongs to everyone, but the paper trail belongs mostly to those allowed to complain where it mattered. A quirky tidbit follows you through the market. Sea coal was sometimes treated almost like an urban villain with a nickname. People described it by where it came from, how it arrived, and how badly it behaved in the air. Some medieval and early modern writers imagined certain coal smoke as corrupting, unhealthy, or morally offensive, as though the fuel were not just dirty but rude. It is funny in a bleak little way. A lump of carbon sits in a basket, minding its own ancient business, and suddenly it is accused of ruining civilization because a goldsmith's furnace has annoyed the neighbours. The marketplace itself is a theatre of fuel. Sellers call out prices. A woman fingers a piece of cloth, checking its weave. A boy runs past with a basket too large for his arms. You hear the clatter of wooden wheels, the bark of a dog, the wet slap of a butcher rinsing a board. Above it all, smoke gathers under the low sky. Coal does not float away politely. On damp days, it presses down. It softens the distance. Church towers become smudged shapes. Faces appear and vanish in grey air. The town feels wrapped in a blanket that nobody washed. And still, coal spreads, because need has a way of stepping around disgust. Urban growth changes everything. More people mean more hearths. More hearths mean more fuel. More trades mean more heat. Brewing, baking, dyeing, lime burning, salt making, metal working, and brick firing all hunger in their own ways. A city is not just a crowd of people. It's a creature that eats wood, coal, grain, water, animals, labour, and time. Coal becomes one answer to the creature's appetite. You follow a fuel cellar into a courtyard where coal is stacked under a rough covering. Your fingertips brush the pile, and black dust clings immediately. There is no touching coal without being marked by it. That simple fact matters socially. Fuel work stains clothing, skin, carts, floors, and storage rooms. It divides spaces into clean and dirty, respectable and necessary. A wealthy household may want heat without evidence, warmth without grime. A servant may carry the basket, tend the fire, sweep the ash, and absorb the smell. Coal creates comfort for some by adding labour for others. Very considerate of it, obviously. In colder regions, the argument for coal becomes stronger. A long winter night stretches over rooftops. Frost glitters on latch and hinge. The woodpile shrinks too quickly. In such conditions, a fuel that burns with lasting heat becomes less nuisance than a survival tool. You sit beside a hearth where coal has settled into a deep orange bed. The sound is quieter than wood, less lively, more inward. It clicks and shifts softly. The warmth is steady, almost sleepy. Outside, wind moves through the lane like water poured through stone. Yet medieval coal remains bound by practical limits. Mining is shallow compared with later ages. Transport remains expensive. Local customs matter. Lords, monasteries, towns, and merchants all have claims, tolls, rights, and arrangements. A seam of coal is not useful simply because it exists. Someone must own access. Dig it, sort it, load it, move it, sell it, and persuade buyers that the smoke is worth enduring. Every lump carries a chain of human decisions. You notice how coal changes the rhythm of rooms. Wood fires invite tending with quick gestures. Add a log, shift a branch, coax a flame. Coal asks for a different patience. It must be banked, stirred, given air, allowed to glow. A careless fire can sulk. A well-managed one can last through bitter hours. The person tending it learns by smell, colour, and heat. Blue hints in the flame, red depth in the coals, grey ash forming at the edges. This knowledge is domestic, practical, and rarely celebrated, which is how much of human survival has always worked. By evening, the town darkens into pockets of amber light. Behind shutters, people eat pottage, mend cloth, count coins, whisper complaints, and warm, tired feet. Smoke leaks through roofs and chimneys. The church bell sounds again, slower now, as if even the bell is ready for bed. Cole sits in the centre of the room like a difficult guest who has brought both trouble and excellent soup. It dirties the walls, it offends the nose, it saves the household from cold. People learn to live with the contradiction. You pause at the edge of the town, where fields begin and the air opens. Behind you, the rooftops breathe smoke into the night. Ahead, the dark countryside smells of wet grass, manure, and distant trees. The contrast is sharp. The medieval town has become a place where natural limits and human hunger meet in every hearth. Coal is still not king. It is not yet the master fuel of machines and empires. But it has entered urban life with a stubborn little glow, useful enough to survive complaint, cheap enough to tempt the practical, and dirty enough to announce that comfort can leave a stain. You stand at the edge of a village where the fields roll gently toward a dark line of trees, and the cottages seem to crouch against the wind. It is early morning, but the sun has not gained much confidence. Mist hangs low over the grass. A rooster announces himself with unnecessary enthusiasm, as roosters tend to do, while smoke rises from a few crooked chimneys. The air smells of wet earth, peat, dung, and cold stone. Somewhere beyond the last cottage, near a slope where the ground has been bitten open, men and boys gather with baskets, ropes, shovels, and lamps. This is not yet the grand industrial mine with iron rails, steam engines, and tall winding gear cutting the skyline. This is smaller, rougher, and closer to village life. Coal lies under the same ground that grows oats and shelters rabbits. The mine is not a distant world. It is right there beside the path, beside the hedgerow, beside the patch of land where children might chase a hoop if adults were not always inventing work for them. You walk toward it slowly, feeling the damp soak into your shoes. The grass brushes your ankles. The smell changes as you near the opening. The fresh country air gives way to something colder, mineral, stale, and faintly smoky from lamps. Early coal mining often began where seams could be reached easily. People cut into hillsides, followed outcrops, or sank shallow shafts called bell pits. A bell pit was simple in idea and unpleasant in practice. A narrow shaft went down to the coal seam, and then miners dug outward at the bottom, widening the space in the shape of a bell. When the roof became too risky, or the easy coal was gone, they abandoned it and dug another nearby. From above, a worked landscape could become pocked with old pits, like a field that had suffered from a very serious case of bad planning. Practical. Yes. Elegant. No. You peer into one of these shallow shafts. The darkness is immediate. It does not gently fade. It begins. A rope hangs over a wooden frame. The wood is damp under your hand, rough with splinters, smelling of rain and old smoke. A basket comes up slowly, swaying, filled with broken coal. The rope groans as it passes over a pulley. A man steadies the load and tips it onto a growing heap. The coal lands with a dull clatter, not the bright ring of metal or the soft thump of wood, but something in between, heavy and final. Below, the mine breathes. You hear voices muffled by earth, a cough, a scrape, a pick-striking seam. The sound is small but persistent, like someone tapping at the inside of the world. The darkness below is not empty. It contains bodies bent low, shoulders pressed against narrow spaces, knees sinking into mud, hands learning the shape of coal by touch. A candle flame trembles in a draught. The air is cool at first, then close and damp with a taste of stone dust on the tongue. You climb down in imagination, one careful foothold at a time. The ladder is slick. The shaft walls feel cold and gritty beneath your fingers. Your back tightens because your body understands before your mind does that the earth above you is heavy. At the bottom, the passage narrows. You crouch. Then you crouch more, which feels a little unfair, because surely one crouch should be enough. The roof is low, propped with timber, where timber can be spared. Water gathers in black puddles. Your sleeve brushes the wall and comes away smeared. Every sound is close. Breathing rises, dripping, scraping. The soft crunch of boots in wet grit. A mainstream historical fact belongs in this dark space. Before deep mechanized mining became common, much coal was extracted by human and animal labor using hand tools, baskets, sledges, windlasses, and simple drainage methods. In many regions, miners followed seams from surface openings or worked shallow pits before deeper shafts demanded more elaborate technology. The work was skilled. Even when it looked crude, a miner had to read stone, judge a roof, understand the seam, notice changes in air, and know when a creak was only a creak and when it was a warning with a very serious tone. The village above depends on this judgment. Coal mining is not just digging. It is a conversation with pressure, water, darkness, and patience. The pick enters the seam at an angle. A wedge is tapped. A slab loosens. The miner listens. He feels through the handle as much as he sees by lamp. Coal breaks in planes, sometimes cleanly, sometimes stubbornly. Dust rises and coats the lips. The smell is earthy and bitter, mixed with sweat, candle grease, damp wool, and the sour breath of men working in enclosed air. There may be horses or ponies near some workings, especially where haulage grows more organized. In smaller pits, people themselves drag baskets or sledges. You hear the strain in the rope and the low grunt of effort. Above ground, a child helps sort pieces from shale. A woman carries tools, food, or water, depending on place and period. Mining communities often rely on whole households, not just individual wage earners. The mine reaches into the cottage, into the kitchen, into the rhythm of meals and washing and waiting. You step into one of those cottages at midday. The door is low. The room smells of broth, smoke, damp cloth, and coal dust that has followed everyone home like an overattached dog. A pair of hands rinses a shirt in grey water. A loaf sits wrapped in cloth. Boots dry near the hearth, stiff with mud. The work underground is hidden, but its residue is everywhere. It blackens fingernails, settles in hair, marks the floorboards, and turns every clean surface into a temporary arrangement. Cleanliness here is not a state. It is a brief, optimistic event. A quirky belief lives around these mines as naturally as moss grows on stone. In some mining traditions, people spoke of underground spirits, knockers, or small hidden beings whose tapping sounds could warn miners of danger, or perhaps cause mischief when they felt ignored. The details vary by region, and the stories do not fit neatly into one tidy belief system. Still, the idea makes sense when you stand underground and hear noises you cannot see. A distant crack, a pebble falling, a hollow tapping from the seam. In the dark, the earth seems to have opinions. Giving those opinions a tiny invisible worker with a bad temper is not the strangest thing humans have ever done. There is still disagreement among mining historians about how much early miners relied on formal inherited technical knowledge compared with practical experience passed quietly from hand to hand, family to family, and village to village. Records often preserve leases, disputes, payments, and ownership more clearly than they preserve the habits of the people who actually crawled into the seam. The archive may tell you who held the rights to dig. It may not tell you exactly how a miner taught his son to hear weakness in a roof, or how a woman at the pit bank judged the quality of coal by weight, shine, and fracture. Much of the skill lived in bodies, and bodies are not very good at leaving paperwork. Ownership adds another layer to the scene. The coal under the land may belong to a lord, a monastery, a freeholder, or someone with purchased rights. The people doing the digging may be tenants, wage workers, seasonal labourers, or members of families tied to the local economy in complicated ways. A seam is geology, but a mine is society. Someone grants permission, someone pays rent, someone supplies rope, someone takes the risk, someone else counts the profit with cleaner hands, because history does enjoy its little jokes. Outside, the pit heap grows. Women and children move near the surface, sorting usable coal from waste stone in some places and periods. The sound is lighter here, pieces knocked together, baskets dragged, voices calling through the damp air. A small cart waits by the track. The horse flicks its ears and stamps, warm breath steaming from its nostrils. The coal will go to a manor house, a town, a smith, a kiln, a salt pan, or a household that needs heat. Each basket pulled from below becomes part of a larger pattern of trade and survival. You return to the shaft as clouds thicken above the village. Rain begins, first as a fine mist, then as a steady patter on the coal heap and wooden frame. Water is the miner's old enemy. It seeps into workings, fills hollows, loosens walls, and makes every task heavier. In shallow pits, buckets and drainage channels may manage it for a time. In deeper workings, water becomes a serious limit. You hear it underground as a constant drip, drip, drip. Patient as a monk and about as cheerful as a tax collector, the floor grows slick. Cold wetness enters boots, fingers numb around tools. The atmosphere tightens as the day lowers. Lamps seem smaller, shadows lean close. You become aware of air itself, of whether it moves, whether the flame burns steady, whether the passage feels fresh or stale. Early miners knew that bad air could gather in enclosed places, though explanations varied. Some dangers announced themselves through smell, others did not. A flickering flame could be a sign, but signs are only useful if noticed in time. The mine teaches attention. It punishes carelessness. It also punishes people who are careful but unlucky. Which is one reason miners have always respected the underground with a seriousness outsiders sometimes mistake for superstition. By late afternoon, the workers emerge one by one, their faces aligned with black dust except where sweat has cut pale tracks down the skin. Their clothes smell of earth, smoke, and effort. Shoulders roll stiffly, hands flex open and closed. Above ground, the world seems almost too bright, even under clouds. A dog barks, a pot clinks inside a cottage. The church bell marks the hour as if time has been calmly passing, though underground it felt thicker and stranger. You stand beside the pit and look across the village. It is quiet, ordinary, and alive with hidden dependents. The mine is not separate from the fields, the hearths, the market, or the family table. It is stitched into all of them. Coal comes up from beneath the pasture and enters every room as warmth, money, soot, fatigue, and possibility. The black rock is still won slowly by muscle, rope, wood, flame, and nerve. No great engine dominates the scene. No iron railway carries mountains away. The scale is human, which sounds comforting until you remember that human backs are doing most of the work. Evening settles. The coal heap darkens into a mound of shadow against the wet grass. From one cottage, a small fire begins to glow. The same material dragged from the cramped passage now gives heat to a room where someone loosens muddy boots and closes tired eyes. The village exhales. Beneath it, the abandoned hollows remain, cool and silent, holding the shape of labour. The earth has been opened, but only a little. Enough to warm a hearth, enough to feed a trade, enough to teach people that below the familiar path and the grazing field, another world waits in darkness, full of weight, sound, and black stone. You hear the mine before you see the engine. It is not the pick-striking coal now, not the groan of a rope, not the soft cough of men rising from the shaft with dust in the creases of their faces. It is water, slow, stubborn, dripping water. It ticks from the roof, runs along the floor, gathers in black pools, and waits with the patience of something that has absolutely nowhere else to be. In the dim underground air, the sound is everywhere. Drip, trickling, splashing under boots. A miner lifts his lamp and watches the flame tremble, while cold dampness presses through his sleeves. Water is one of coal mining's great enemies. It seeps down through cracks, collects in old workings, and rises in shafts. A shallow pit can be bailed by hand for a while, with buckets, drains, and weary patience. But deeper mines need stronger help. You stand near a flooded passage and feel the chill come up from below like breath from a cellar. The smell is earthy and stale, with a metallic taste that sits on the tongue. The walls shine wetly in the lamplight. The coal seam is there, rich and tempting, but water bars the way like a sleepy guard who refuses to move. Above ground, the answer begins to take shape in wood, iron, flame, and steam. You walk toward an engine house near a mine, and it feels almost ceremonial. The building is plain, thick-walled, and practical, but there is something grand about it, as if the village has built a chapel for noise. From within comes a heavy rhythm, slow and commanding. A beam rises and falls, chains tighten, pumps move deep below. The whole structure seems to breathe. Inside, heat touches your face at once. The air smells of coal smoke, hot metal, grease, wet timber, and ash. It is a crowded smell, not pleasant exactly, but alive with purpose. A fire burns beneath a boiler. Water hisses, valves clack. The great beam overhead moves with a calm, nodding motion, like some enormous animal agreeing with itself. Men watch gauges, tend fires, listen for changes. The engine does not run by magic. It runs by attention. It must be fed, coaxed, cleaned, repaired, and respected. Which is also true of cats, though cats are less useful for pumping mines. One mainstream historical fact belongs firmly here. Thomas Newcomen's atmospheric steam engine, developed in the early 18th century, became especially important for pumping water out of mines. It was not fast, elegant, or efficient by modern standards. It used a lot of coal, but when placed near coal mines, that weakness mattered less, because fuel was close at hand. The engine's appetite could be tolerated when the fuel heap sat nearby like a very dirty pantry. You watch the Newcomen engine work in its steady cycle. Steam fills a cylinder, then cold water condenses that steam, creating a vacuum. Atmospheric pressure pushes the piston down. The beam rocks. The pump rod lifts water from the mine. The motion repeats. slow and tireless. Steam, chill, pressure, weight, lift. It is simple in outline and complex in practice. Every stroke is a small victory over the underground flood. The sound fills your bones. Thump, creak, sigh, thump again. Outside, horses shift by carts. Smoke drifts low across the yard. A worker opens a furnace door and orange light spills out like a sudden sunrise trapped in iron. Your skin feels the blast of heat. Then the cold wind as the door closes. Soot powders the window ledges. Rain beads on the engine house stones and turns black where coal dust has settled. This is where coal begins to feed a machine that helps release more coal. There is something almost circular about it, and history loves a circle when it can make one dramatic. Coal heats water, steam moves pumps, pumps drain mines, mines yield coal, more coal feeds more engines. It is not yet a world of roaring locomotives and endless factory belts. It is a world learning that heat can be converted into motion, and motion can reach places human arms cannot. A quirky tidbit sits beside the boiler. Early steam engines were often called fire engines. The name sounds exciting, as if they might gallop off to rescue a burning barn, but it simply reflected their relationship with flame. Fire made steam, steam made motion, motion lifted water. To local people, though, the engine could seem almost uncanny. It breathed smoke, groaned under load, shook the ground, and worked through the night. You can imagine a child watching from a cottage doorway, half frightened, half amazed, while the beam rises and falls against the evening sky like the arm of a giant too tired to stand up. The people who tend these engines become a new kind of worker. They are not miners exactly, though their labour serves the mine. They are not smiths, though they know metal. They are not simply firemen, though they spend their hours feed in the furnace. They listen to pistons, pack seals, judge steam, clear ash, and keep the pump alive. Their hands are rough, warm, and blackened. Their ears learn the machine's moods. A change in rhythm can mean trouble. A hiss in the wrong place can mean danger. A lazy stroke can mean lost pressure or a mechanical fault. The engine speaks in sounds, and skilled people learn its language. Scholars remain divided on whether steam power should be seen as the main driver of industrial change, or as a response to problems that mining and fuel supply had already created. It is tempting to say the engine changed everything by itself, because people adore a hero invention. It is tidy, it is dramatic, it fits nicely in a schoolbook paragraph. But real history is messier and less obedient. Coal mining needed drainage. Drainage encouraged steam engines. Steam engines consumed coal. Cheaper coal encouraged more uses for steam. The cause and the consequence lean on each other like tired workers at the end of a shift. You step outside and follow a channel where pumped water spills away from the mine. It runs brown and cold over stones, carrying grit and an oily sheen. The sound is brighter in the open air, rushing instead of dripping. Beyond it, the coal yard is busy. Carts arrive empty and leave full. Wheels grind through mud. Men shout over the engine's steady beat. A dog trots through the yard and immediately becomes a slightly blacker dog. No one is surprised. The steam engine changes the feeling of time around the mine. Human work has rhythms of fatigue, hunger, weather, and daylight. A machine can push against those rhythms. It still needs people, fuel, maintenance, and luck. But its pulse is not the same as a human pulse. It can work through dark hours. It can pump while rain falls. It can keep lifting water when arms would fail. You stand in the yard at dusk and realize the engine has not grown sleepy. The people have, the horses have, even the smoke seems tired, but the beam continues to nod. This mechanical patience spreads into workshops. Coal-fired steam engines begin to offer power where water wheels are inconvenient or unreliable. A water wheel depends on a river, a stream, a good fall of water, and weather that does not sulk too much. Steam power can be placed nearer coal, nearer labour, nearer markets, or nearer the ambitions of someone with money and a dangerous amount of confidence. At first, many engines are still clumsy and expensive. They are most useful where their hunger can be fed cheaply. But the idea is extraordinary power can be made by boiling water with buried sunlight. You enter a workshop where a small engine turns machinery through rods, gears, and belts. The room vibrates gently. The floorboards tremble under your shoes. Tools hang along the wall. Iron parts wait on benches. The smell is a mixture of oil, hot dust, smoke, and human sweat. A belt slaps and hums. A wheel turns. Motion passes from beam to shaft to tool, as if invisible hands are multiplying labour. The workers still guide, lift, measure, and repair. But the machine supplies a new force in the room. There is wonder here, but not softness. Steam does not remove hardship. It rearranges it. Someone must mine the coal, haul it, shovel it, burn it, clear the ash, and breathe the smoke. Someone must work near boilers that can fail. Someone must maintain pumps in wet shafts and engines in bitter weather. The black rock gives power, but it asks for bodies in return. It always does. You feel the heat on your face and the grit in your eyes. You hear the engine's deep breath and the miner's cough. Progress arrives with soot on its cuffs. In another engine house, improvements are discussed with serious faces over drawings, tools, and cups of weak ale. James Watt's separate condenser becomes one of the famous changes that make steam engines more fuel efficient, reducing the waste of heating and cooling the main cylinder again and again. The improvement matters because coal may be abundant in some places, but waste still has a cost. An engine that uses less fuel can travel farther from the pit head into mills, factories, and cities. Efficiency sounds dull until you realise it can redraw a map. The atmosphere around steam is full of argument, hope, and suspicion. Some people see opportunity. Mine owners see deeper seams. Engineers see puzzles. Workers see wages, danger, and stricter discipline. Neighbours see smoke. Investors see numbers and try not to look too closely at the mud. The engine house becomes a meeting place for earth and calculation, for fire and finance, for practical skill and restless invention. Night settles over the mine. The engine continues, slower in your perception now, almost hypnotic. The beam rises, pauses, lowers. Steam sighs into cooler air. Water lifts from the dark below, stroke by stroke. The smoke from the chimney blends with the clouds until you cannot tell where industry ends and weather begins. Your hand rests on the warm brick wall, and the vibration passes faintly into your palm. It is not violent. It is steady. That steadiness is the secret. Coal has found a hunger outside the hearth. Not just warmth, not just cooking, not just a smith's fire or a kiln's glow. It now feeds motion. It feeds a pump that opens the mine, an engine that turns a shaft, a machine that changes the pace of work. In the darkness, water keeps rising, but now it is met by iron, flame, and steam. The black rock burns, the boiler murmurs, the piston moves, and the world grows a little louder. You step into the factory district while the sky is still dark, and the first thing you notice is that morning no longer belongs to the sun. It belongs to the bell. The bell rings from a yard wall, sharp and metallic, cutting through mist, sleep, and private dreams with absolutely no concern for anyone's emotional needs. Doors open along narrow streets, boots hit cobbles, shawls are pulled tight, lunch parcels are tucked under arms. You join the flow of workers moving toward long brick buildings where windows glow pale yellow before dawn has fully decided to participate. The air is cold, but the factory is already warm. Smoke rises from chimneys in thick columns, rolling upward and spreading under the low clouds. You smell coal before you reach the gate soot, hot ash, damp brick, oil, and a sour edge from crowded drains. It catches in the throat, not enough to stop you, just enough to remind you who is in charge. Coal does not politely decorate the landscape. It occupies it. Inside, the change is immediate. The floor trembles beneath your shoes. Machinery fills the room with a layered raw belt slapping, gears turning, shuttles snapping, wheels humming, shafts rotating overhead. The sound is not one noise, but a weather system. It surrounds you. It presses against the ribs. Conversation becomes gesture. A nod, a raised hand, a quick glance toward a machine that has started behaving badly. Because machines, like toddlers and aristocrats, often demand attention at the worst possible moment. Coal has entered the factory not merely as fuel, but as rhythm. It heats boilers that drive steam engines, and those engines turn lines of machinery through shafts and belts. In textile mills, ironworks, potteries, glass houses, breweries, and workshops, coal helps detach production from older limits of water, wind, muscle, and season. The factory does not need a perfect stream in a perfect valley. It needs fuel, labour, capital, and a place to vent smoke where people may complain but not successfully enough. A mainstream historical fact becomes plain in the heat, and noise coal-powered steam engines helped accelerate factory production during the Industrial Revolution, while coal-derived coke transformed iron-making by allowing furnaces to produce iron on a much larger scale than traditional charcoal methods. Coke is coal-heated in a low-oxygen environment until many impurities and gases are driven off, leaving a porous, carbon-rich fuel that burns hot and strong. The name sounds like it should come with a glass bottle and bubbles, but no, this coke is dirtier, older, and far more interested in melting iron. You leave the textile room and enter an ironworks where the atmosphere changes again. Here the heat is not just warm, it is physical. It comes at you in waves, touching your face, drying your lips, tightening the skin around your eyes. Furnaces glow white-orange. Men move with practiced caution, their bodies shining with sweat in the furnace light. Chains rattle. Iron bars clank. A hammer falls with a deep, shuddering blow that seems to pass through the floor and up your bones. Sparks scatter like brief golden insects, then vanish. The smell is sharper here: coal smoke, hot iron, scorched dust, sweat, and the faint mineral tang of slag. Every surface seems coated in a film of black and brown. Your hand brushes a railing and comes away gritty. The heat makes the room feel alive, almost breathing, but not gently. This is the breath of furnaces, bellows, boilers, and men who work close enough to danger that care becomes a habit as automatic as blinking. Coal does not simply make more things. It changes what kinds of things can be made, how fast, how cheaply, and in what quantities. Iron rails, beams, machines, pipes, tools, nails, chains, engines, bridges, and factory frames all depend on fuel-hungry processes. A world of wood and hand-forging gives way to heavier materials and larger ambitions. You watch molten iron run in channels of sand, glowing like captured lava. The light flickers across faces and brick walls. It is beautiful in the way powerful things often are, which is to say beautiful enough to distract you from how punishing the work can be. The factory day is ruled by time in a new way. In a cottage workshop, labour could follow task, daylight, family need, or local custom. In the factory, the clock hardens, the bell calls workers in, the overseer watches, the engine turns. Machines do not enjoy waiting while someone finishes a leisurely breakfast. A minute late can mean a fine. A stopped machine can mean lost wages. The day becomes measured in hours, shifts, output, and discipline. You feel it in the posture of workers, in the quickness of hands, in the way eyes return again and again to the moving parts. There is a scholarly argument here that refuses to sleep quietly. Some historians emphasize machines and energy, seeing coal-fired power as the core engine of industrial growth. Others focus on labor discipline, markets, empire, finance, and social control, arguing that the factory system was as much about organizing people as powering equipment. The truth does not fit into a neat little box, which is inconsiderate but typical. Coal supplies force, owners supply rules, workers supply skill and endurance. The factory emerges from all of them at once. You stand beside a row of spinning frames. Young workers move quickly between them, tying broken threads, clearing waste, watching for snags. Their fingers are fast because they must be. Cotton dust hangs in the air, soft-looking but harsh in the lungs. It settles on hair and lashes. The room smells of oil, fibre, warm metal, and human closeness. Windows are tall but often grimy. Light enters in pale stripes. In winter, the warmth may seem welcome at first, but hours inside turn it heavy and stale. A quirky detail whispers from the machinery in some mills. Workers developed little private names for machines, tools, overseers, and routines, turning the huge impersonal system into something more familiar and mockable. A stubborn machine might gain a personality. A bell might be treated like a scolding relative. People have always survived large systems partly by making jokes about them. Even under a roof full of roaring iron, sarcasm finds a way to clock in. Factory clothing changes with the work. Loose fabric can catch in machines, so sleeves are tied, hair covered, aprons tightened. You feel the roughness of cloth against your wrist, the damp warmth under the collar, the grit settling in the crease of your neck. Hands become mapped by labour cuts, calluses, burns, stains, small scars from moments when metal or thread or tool moved faster than expected. Industrial work leaves signatures on the body. Some are visible. Others settle quietly in the chest, joints, hearing, and sleep. Outside the mill, streets grow around the workplaces like roots around stone. Rows of houses stand close together, built quickly for workers whose lives now orbit the factory gate. The rooms are small, the walls thin, the yards crowded. Coal warms these homes too, but its smoke returns through the same air. A family hearth gives comfort, yet the neighbourhood lies under a darkened sky. Laundry struggles against soot. Window ledges blacken. Rain water in barrels may gather a grey skin. Even snow, when it comes, does not remain innocent for long. It turns speckled, then slushy, then grim, as if winter itself has taken a factory job. You enter a worker's kitchen at the end of a shift. The room is dim, lit by fire and lamp. The coal fire clicks softly in the grate. A pot simmers. Steam fogs the window. The smell of boiled potatoes, damp boots, soap, smoke, and tired bodies fills the air. Someone rubs sore fingers. Someone else listens with half-closed eyes as the youngest child explains something urgent about a broken toy. The factory is not left behind at the gate. It comes home in dust on clothes, ringing in ears, wages in a pocket, and exhaustion at the table. Coal also changes night. Work can begin before dawn and continue after sunset because fuel, lamps, and engines make darkness less commanding. This does not mean night becomes friendly. It becomes usable. There is a difference. The glow of furnaces turns windows red. Mill yards shine with lanterns. Chimneys exhale into starless skies. You walk through a street where the factory lamps burn beyond curtained windows, and the sound of machinery continues as a dull, far-off vibration. Sleep settles over some houses while labour continues in others. The town becomes a creature with more than one heartbeat. In the ironworks, production links to distant markets. Orders come from cities, docks, mines, farms, and armies. The factory makes goods for people the workers will never meet. Cloth travels. Iron travels. Tools travel. Profit travels most comfortably of all. Naturally. Coal makes it possible for one place to produce beyond its immediate needs, feeding a widening commercial world. The worker at the frame, the stoker at the boiler, the furnace man at the tapping hole, and the clerk with ink on his cuff all belong to the same growing system, though not equally, and not comfortably. There is pride here as well as hardship. It would be too simple to paint every factory as only misery. Skilled workers know their worth. Engineers admire precision. Ironmasters boast of output. Communities form around shared labour, shared danger, shared songs, shared complaints, and the excellent human tradition of judging management, a well-made beam, a smooth length of cloth, a powerful engine part, a bridge component ready for assembly. These carry human intelligence as surely as any handmade object. The factory is not soulless. Its soul is crowded, smoky, noisy, and underpaid. But it is there. Even so, the discipline can feel relentless. The engine's turning sets the pace. The furnace demands feeding. The machines require tending. Coal allows production to grow larger than the natural rhythms that once slowed human ambition. In this new world, stopping becomes expensive. Quiet becomes rare. Air becomes a workplace material, taken in by lungs and given back with a cough. You pause near the factory door as evening thickens. Workers spill into the street, faces pale under soot, shoulders rounded, voices returning now that the machinery is behind them. The bell is silent for the moment, which feels like a small mercy. Behind the wall, boilers cool slightly, furnaces dim, and coal heaps wait in the yard under a dusting of ash. The brick buildings stand against the dark like sleeping animals that are not truly asleep. The black rock has become more than heat. It is schedule, pressure, wages, iron, cloth, smoke, and speed. It wakes factories before dawn and keeps them breathing after sunset. It turns buried forests into motion on the factory floor. You feel the last vibration of the machines in your feet as you step away, while chimney smoke drifts overhead and the town settles uneasily into a night that still smells of work. You stand beside a railway cutting in the pale light of morning, where the earth has been sliced open to make a level path for iron rails. The banks rise on either side, raw with clay, chalk, roots, and wet stones. Grass has not yet softened the wound. Men move along the track with tools over their shoulders, boots sinking slightly into mud. The air smells of damp soil, tar, horse sweat, hot metal, and coal smoke drifting from a locomotive waiting nearby like a black iron animal pretending to be patient. The engine breathes. It gives out a low hiss, then a sigh, then a sudden puff of steam that rolls white against the cool air. Drops of condensed water patter onto the ground. The boiler ticks as it warms. Somewhere inside, pressure gathers in silence, which is always a little dramatic. The fireman opens the firebox door, and for a moment the inside glows orange and fierce, lighting his face from below. He shovels coal into the heat. The shovel bites into the tender with a gritty scrape, then rings against the firebox lip. Coal tumbles forward, catches, and begins its transformation from black stone to motion. You climb into a carriage. The seat is hard beneath you, polished by nervous travellers and dusty coats. A faint smell of varnished wood mixes with smoke that has already found its way through every gap, because smoke is a curious little thing and has no respect for boundaries. People settle around you with baskets, bundles, hats, and stiff expressions. Some are excited. Some look as though they have agreed to be fired from a cannon for educational purposes. A child presses close to the window. A gentleman checks his watch. A woman adjusts her gloves and pretends not to be impressed. The whistle shrieks. It is not a gentle sound. It tears through the morning, startling birds from the hedgerow and making a horse toss its head near the road. Then comes the first pull, a jolt through the carriage, felt in your spine and knees. Couplings clank, wheels begin to turn, slowly at first, then faster. The rails sing under the weight. The rhythm gathers chuff, 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 chuff. The landscape begins to slide. Coal has become speed. A mainstream historical fact sits firmly on these rails. The Liverpool and Manchester Railway, opened in 1830, became one of the first major intercity railways built to carry both passengers and freight, using steam locomotives. It linked a great port with a major manufacturing centre, and showed that railways could move goods and people with a regularity and speed that older roads and canals struggled to match. The line was not merely a novelty. It was a signal that coal, iron, steam, engineering, and finance had found a new shape together. You feel that shape under you now. The carriage rocks from side to side, the windows rattle, soot flecks drift in, tiny black specks landing on sleeves, cheeks, pages, and sandwiches, because apparently even lunch must participate in industrial progress. Outside, fields pass in broad green strips, hedges flicker, sheep lift their heads and reconsider everything they know about reality. Farm lanes vanish behind embankments. A church tower appears, holds still for a breath, then slips away. Railways change distance not by moving towns, but by changing how time feels between them. A journey that once meant mud, changing horses, aching bones, and uncertain weather becomes scheduled, ticketed, and increasingly ordinary. Ordinary is the important word. At first, the railway is wonder. Then it becomes expectation. People begin to plan around departure boards, timetables, station clocks, freight rates, and the knowledge that a letter, a crate of goods, or a person can arrive faster than yesterday's imagination allowed. The locomotive's hunger is constant. Coal disappears from the tender one shovel at a time. The fireman works in heat that reddens his face and dampens his shirt. His palms know the handle. His boots brace against the engine's motion. The driver watches signals, pressure, gradient, and track. Steam power looks mighty from the platform, but inside the cab it is labour, judgment, and heat. The engine does not simply go. It is driven, fed, listened to, and kept alive. You lean toward the window and taste soot on your lips. The wind pushes against your face, cold and smoky at once. The carriage smells of wool, leather, coal dust, damp umbrellas, and the faint human anxiety of people travelling faster than their grandparents would have considered sensible. Beneath the wheels, joints in the rails beat out a pulse, iron striking iron. Speed turned into sound. A quirky railway tidbit follows the smoke early. Critics warned that fast travel might damage the human body, confuse the senses, frighten livestock, ruin crops, or make cows stop giving milk. Some fears were exaggerated, but they reveal how unnatural railway speed first seemed. To people used to walking, riding, or moving by canal boat, a train rushing across the countryside could feel less like transport and more like a mechanical weather event. And to be fair, if an enormous steam machine screamed past your pasture for the first time, you too might have concerns, especially if you were a cow with a peaceful schedule. Stations become new gateways. You step onto a platform where porters shout destinations, trunks thump onto carts, and coal smoke settles under the roof. The station clock hangs above everything like a stern little moon. Time here becomes public and precise. Local habits of sun, bell, and market day give way to railway time, because trains cannot politely wait for every town to have its own opinion about noon. Timetables encourage standardization, and standardization encourages more timetables, which is how civilization slowly traps itself in paperwork. The atmosphere is brisk, noisy, and full of motion. A woman buys a ticket through a small window. A merchant argues about freight charges. A porter wipes his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a black streak like a badge of service. Barrels, crates, coal wagons, mailbags, livestock, newspapers, and passengers all converge in one place. The railway does not carry only bodies, it carries markets, gossip, food, news, expectation, and impatience. Coal travels by rail in enormous quantities, and this matters deeply. Mines can send fuel farther and faster, factories can receive steadier supplies, cities can grow larger because fuel, food, and materials arrive more reliably. Ironworks produce rails, locomotives, bridges, and wheels, while railways carry coal to ironworks and iron back to railways. Another circle forms, tighter and larger than a village pit or factory yard. Coal powers the train that carries coal to the place where more iron is made to build more railway to carry more coal. Subtle, not really. Effective, very. Historians continue to dispute how far railways caused industrial expansion, and how far they simply accelerated changes already underway through canals, roads, ports, and factories. The debate is not sleepy, even if this story is trying its best to be. Some scholars emphasize railways as revolutionary, a leap in transport that integrated markets and lowered costs. Others point out that many industrial regions were already connected by waterways and turnpikes, making railways part of a broader transport evolution rather than a single miracle. The rails are important, but they do not float above society. They are laid through money, law, land, labour, politics, and coal smoke. Landowners argue, engineers survey, navvies dig. These railway labourers, often called navigators because of earlier canal work, cut through hills, build embankments, tunnel through rock, and lay track mile by mile. You stand near a work camp and hear picks striking stone, barrows creaking, men calling to one another, and rain tapping on canvas shelters. The smell is of mud, sweat, cheap tobacco, cooking fires, and wet wool. Hands blister, shoulders strain. Explosives may be used in difficult ground, and the earth shakes with muffled force. The elegant line on a railway map hides an enormous amount of muscle. Tunnels feel different from open track. You enter one on foot before the train, and the air cools sharply around you. The walls are damp to the touch. Your voice comes back changed, hollow and close. Water drips somewhere in the darkness. When a locomotive enters, the tunnel becomes thunder. Steam and smoke rebound from the brick. The sound swells until it seems too large for the space. Lamps flicker. Your chest feels the pressure of noise. Then the train bursts out into daylight, trailing smoke like a dark ribbon unravelling behind it. Railways alter towns as much as fields. New districts gather around stations, hotels, warehouses, refreshment rooms, coal depots, repair sheds, and sidings spread along the lines. Places once quiet become junctions. Places bypassed may fade. A market town can find itself suddenly closer to a port, a factory, or a capital city in practical terms, even though the miles have not changed. Opportunity begins choosing winners and losers with iron wheels. Passengers learn new manners. They read in motion, sleep sitting upright, share compartments with strangers, and judge one another's luggage in silence, that ancient human sport. Classes of carriage separate comfort by price. First-class cushions one body, third-class hardens another. Speed is shared, but not equally softened. Coal may pull the whole train, yet social rank still decides how much soot and cold air each traveller must personally become acquainted with. Freight transforms quietly. Fresh milk, meat, fish, newspapers, textiles, tools, and letters move with new urgency. A city breakfast may depend on a dawn train. A factory order may depend on wagons arriving full and leaving fuller. Coal wagons clatter through yards in endless rows, their black loads mounded and dusty. The sound of buffers meeting is dull and heavy. Chains jangle. break blocks smell hot. Steam drifts along the ground and curls around boots. You return to the moving train at evening. The carriage lamp has been lit. Outside, the land darkens to blue and black. Sparks fly from the locomotive chimney and vanish above the embankment. The window glass is cool beneath your fingertips, trembling with the motion. You see brief scenes in passing a cottage lamp, a canal bridge, a horse in a field, a distant furnace glow, a station platform where someone waits with a valise. Each appears and disappears before the mind can settle on it. The railway has made the world feel connected and restless. It has also made it smoky, scheduled, and loud. Coal burns at the front, unseen from your seat but present in every jolt, every mile, every grey smear on the window. The black rock has left the hearth, the pit, the pump, and the factory floor to become a traveller itself, carrying nations across their own landscapes at a speed that once belonged only to storms, rumours, and very ambitious horses. The engine slows as it nears a station. Brakes squeal. Steam sighs around the platform. The wheels grind to stillness. For a moment, all that power settles into quiet ticking metal and drifting smoke. You step down, and the platform feels solid but strangely motionless, as if the earth has paused. Behind you, the locomotive waits with its fire still glowing, hungry for the next shovel of coal, ready to turn another stretch of iron road into movement. You stand on a harbour quay at dawn, where the tide lifts slowly against stone walls and the whole waterfront smells of salt, tar, rope, fish, bilge water, and coal dust. The sea is not blue here. It is pewter, streaked with oil, wrinkled by wind, and darkened where barges have spilled little trails of black fuel into the water. Gulls wheel overhead, screaming as if personally offended by maritime commerce. Below them, men move along the quay with sacks, barrows, hooks, ledgers, and the tired expressions of people who know the day will be heavy before it has properly begun. Coal has come to the ocean, not gently, of course. Coal is not a gentle traveller. It arrives in wagons, barges, and ships' holds, staining everything it touches. It piles in heaps near the docks, black against the pale morning, glittering slightly when the light catches broken edges. You place your hand on a chunk and feel its dry grit cling to your palm. A porter passes, shoulder bent under a sack. Each step lands with a dull thud on the boards. Chains clank, winches creak. A steam crane exhales and lifts another load, swinging it slowly over an open hatch where men below shout through the dust. The ship waiting beside the quay is not a graceful sailing vessel depending on wind and patience. It is iron-sided, smoke-stacked, and hungry. Its funnels rise like dark throats. From within comes the muted clang of shovels, the ring of metal doors, the pulse of pumps, and the low vibration of boilers gathering heat. Down in the stokehold, firemen feed the furnaces in a light that flickers orange across sweat, soot, and iron. The air is thick and brutal, smelling of hot coal, ash, steam, salt, and human effort. You feel the heat even in imagination, pressing against the face and drying the mouth. A mainstream historical fact belongs to this harbour during the 19th century. Steamships increasingly depended on coal, and global networks of coaling stations became essential to imperial navies and commercial shipping. A steam vessel could ignore contrary winds more easily than a sailing ship, but it could not ignore an empty bunker. Coal gave ships reliable power, yet it also tied them to ports, supply chains, contracts, labourers, and protected stations across the world. Freedom from wind created dependence on fuel. History enjoys that sort of bargain, usually while pretending it is progress. You walk along the dock where coal is being loaded for a long voyage. The work is filthy and rhythmic. Baskets rise and vanish. Planks tremble under boots. Men cough into blackened sleeves. Dust settles on eyelashes, moustaches, collars, ropes, and the pale skins of oranges in a nearby crate. Everything shares the same grey film. A clerk tries to keep his ledger clean and fails with dignity. Somewhere, a sailor laughs at him, which seems fair. Steamships change the meaning of distance across the sea. Sailing routes once depended heavily on winds, currents, seasonal patterns, and the skill of captains reading sky and canvas. Steam does not abolish weather, because the ocean remains the ocean and enjoys reminding people of that. But steam makes schedules more predictable. Mail can arrive with greater regularity. Troops can be moved more quickly. Goods can cross oceans with tighter expectations. A government in one capital can imagine touching distant territories through ships that burn black rock deep in their bellies. You step aboard and descend toward the coal bunkers. The passage narrows. The air grows warmer, thicker. Your fingers brush an iron rail slick with condensation and dust beneath your boots. The deck vibrates faintly. The bunker itself is a dark cavity packed with fuel, a hidden stomach beside the engine room. Coal is stored not as treasure, but as appetite measured in tons. Every mile at sea has a cost in shovels. Every knot of speed eats into the pile. On long routes, captains and engineers calculate consumption with nervous care. A ship can be powerful, modern, and impressive, but without coal it becomes a very expensive drifting object. Coaling stations become imperial stepping stones. Ports such as Gibraltar, Malta, Aden, Singapore, Hong Kong, and others gain strategic value because they allow fleets to refuel, repair, and continue projecting power. You stand at one of these hot colonial harbours, where the sun beats on white walls and the coal heaps shimmer with heat. The smell is sharper here, mixed with spices, sweat, seawater, animals, cooking smoke, and tropical vegetation bruised by humidity. Palm fronds move lazily in air that feels too thick to breathe properly. A naval vessel waits offshore, black smoke staining the sky above its funnel. Coal links distant places in a chain of practical necessity. Mines in Wales, northern England, Appalachia, India, Australia, South Africa, and elsewhere feed ships, railways, factories, and ports. Welsh steam coal, especially from the South Wales, becomes famous for its quality in marine use because it burns hot and relatively efficiently, with less smoke than some alternatives. At Cardiff, you see the scale of export. Rail lines converge, coal tips reach toward the docks, wagons rumble in endless processions. The whole port seems built around the movement of black fuel from valley seams to ocean routes. There is pride in such places, and exhaustion too. The coal that powers empire begins with miners underground, then moves through haulers, sorters, railway workers, dockers, trimmers, stokers, engineers, merchants, and naval planners. The route from seam to steam is crowded with bodies. A polished Admiralty map may show neat lines across oceans, but every line rests on sore shoulders, black lungs, and hands that have carried the fuel grain by grain, lump by lump, shovel by shovel. A quirky maritime tidbit rises from the coal dust stokers, and firemen working below decks were sometimes called the Black Gang, not because of villainy, but because soot turned them nearly the same colour as the fuel they shoveled. They lived and worked in a world far below the clean uniforms on deck, where heat shimmered, sweat ran black, and the furnaces glowed like small angry suns. On some ships, passengers enjoying dinner above might barely think of them, which is very convenient when one wants speed without considering the people roasting underfoot. Coal also changes naval warfare. Steam warships can manoeuvre without waiting for wind, and ironclads make older wooden fleets look suddenly fragile and antique. Rather like a fancy chair at a hammer convention, navies must now think about fuel supply as seriously as guns, armour, crews, and strategy. A fleet far from coal is a fleet with a shrinking future. This is why islands, canals, choke points, and harbours become charged with new importance. Geography does not disappear in the steam age. It becomes bunkered, fortified, dredged, surveyed, and argued over in rooms full of maps. Scholars still disagree over how much coal itself shaped imperial expansion, compared with older motives such as trade, territorial rivalry, missionary activity, finance, and military competition. Some see coaling stations as central to the machinery of empire, making distant control practical. Others caution that coal was one factor within a wider web of ambitions and anxieties. The argument matters because coal can look like the engine of history, but engines need owners, routes, politics, and passengers. A fuel may power a ship, yet it does not decide where the ship is ordered to go. You cross the Indian Ocean in the imagination of a mail steamer. The deck is hot under your shoes by midday. Canvas awnings snap softly in the wind. Passengers seek shade, their clothing damp at the collar. The funnel releases a dark plume that trails behind and slowly thins over the water. Below, the stokehold is another climate entirely. Shovels scrape. Furnace doors slam. Coal dust hangs in the lungs. The ship's heartbeat is not the elegant slap of waves against the hull, though that sound is there. The deeper rhythm is mechanical piston rod, crank screw, water churned into wake. At night, the sea darkens into velvet. Stars appear overhead, astonishingly clear away from port smoke. Yet the ship carries its own industrial weather. Sparks lift from the funnel and vanish. Warm draughts rise through vents. The deck smells faintly of soot, even under the salt air. You grip the rail and feel vibration passing through the metal into your palm. The ocean seems endless, but the coal bunker is not somewhere. The engineer knows how many tons remain. The romance of travel meets arithmetic in the dark. In port cities, coal reshapes labour and landscape. Coaling a ship is urgent work because time at harbour costs money. Crews of men and women in some ports carry baskets in relentless lines, moving fuel from lighter to ship, from quay to bunker, from heap to hold. The atmosphere becomes a storm of dust. Eyes sting. Bare feet or worn shoes grip planks slick with powder. Voices call in many languages. The empire of coal is global but not tidy. It is multilingual, sweaty, improvised, and unequal. The cargoes carried by coal-powered ships change daily life across continents. Tea, cotton, grain, wool, sugar, machinery, letters, newspapers, migrants, soldiers, and officials move through these routes. Some journeys bring opportunity, some carry coercion, some carry ordinary hopes packed into trunks. A family standing on a dock watches smoke rise from a departing steamer, hearing the low blast of its horn roll across the water. The sound is mournful and confident at once. Departure has always liked to be dramatic. By late afternoon, you return to the coal port. Rain begins to fall, turning dust into black paste. It slicks the stones, darkens ropes, and beads on the iron sides of ships. The smell deepens wet coal, salt, horse manure, steam, and river mud. Workers keep moving, ships must sail, boilers must be fed, contracts must be met. The tide does not pause because everyone is damp and tired, which seems inconsiderate, but very on brand for tides. Coal has become a world system. It is no longer only the warmth of a room, the pulse of a pump, the roar of a mill, or the speed of a train. It is the hidden fuel of ocean routes, imperial reach, naval planning, and global trade. It sits in bunkers beneath polished decks, in heaps beside tropical harbours, in ledgers, treaties, dockyards, and strategic calculations. You watch one steamer pull away from the quay, smoke unfurling above it like a dark banner. The propeller churns the harbour water to foam. The horn sounds once, low and long. Then the ship moves toward open sea, carrying coal in its belly and history in its wake. You enter a coal town at evening, when the lamps have begun to glow and the streets are the colour of wet slate. Rows of brick houses stand shoulder to shoulder, each one narrow, practical, and smoke-stained, as if the whole settlement has been dipped lightly in ash. The air smells of coal fires, boiled cabbage, damp wool, soap, horse manure, and rainwater standing in gutters. Somewhere, a baby cries, somewhere else. A door slams, boots scrape on stone, and a woman calls across the lane with the sharp accuracy of someone who has spent years making herself heard over carts, whistles, and weather. You walk slowly past windows blurred by steam. Behind the glass, rooms are small and warm, with firelight flickering across tables, tin plates, hanging laundry, and tired faces. Coal warms the house, but it also enters it like an uninvited relative who will not wipe his feet. It settles on curtains, it gathers along mantelpieces, it darkens ceilings above the grate. You touch a windowsill and feel the fine grit under your fingertips. Clean hands are possible here, but they require optimism, effort, and perhaps a small miracle. A miner comes home down the lane, his shoulders rounded from the day. His face is blackened except around the eyes, where sweat has cleared pale crescents in the dust. He carries his lamp and lunch tin. His boots are heavy with mud. When he steps inside, the room seems to shift around him. Children look up. A kettle hisses. The fire clicks softly in the grate. He lowers himself into a chair with the careful motion of someone whose body has already done enough bargaining with gravity. Coal mining communities often grow around the pit, and the pit shapes almost everything: housing, shops, schools, chapels, pubs, clubs, medical aid societies, brass bands, burial funds, football teams, and political meetings gather within the shadow of the winding gear. The miner's workplace, clock, landlord, danger, and identity. It is not merely where people earn money. It is the reason the town exists, the reason the streets are where they are, the reason the railway siding runs behind the houses, the reason the morning whistle can pull hundreds of people from sleep with one breath. One mainstream historical fact belongs firmly in these streets in Britain. The Mines and Collieries Act of 1842 prohibited women and girls from working underground and barred boys under 10 from underground mine labour. The law came after public investigations exposed harsh conditions, especially for women and children in pits. It did not make mining safe, generous, or gentle. Laws rarely manage that by themselves, despite their charming confidence, but it marked a major public recognition that coal's human cost could no longer remain hidden under the ground. You step into a kitchen where washing is underway. A tub sits near the fire, steam rises from grey water. A woman scrubs a shirt, knuckles reddened, sleeves pushed high. The cloth gives off a smell of soap, sweat, coal dust, and damp cotton. She rubs and rinses, fighting a blackness that seems almost philosophical in its determination. Nearby, a child polishes a pair of boots. Another sorts small pieces of coal for the grate. Domestic labour is part of the coal economy. Even when no wage is attached to it, the mine dirt comes home, and someone must wrestle with it indoors. The room is not silent. The kettle rattles. A spoon taps a pot. Fire shifts in the grate with little ticking sounds. Rain whispers against the window. From outside comes the muffled song of men leaving a pub, their voices warm, uneven, and brave in the dark. The atmosphere is intimate, but never separate from industry. Even rest has soot around the edges. In many mining districts, wages are paid according to systems that can be difficult, disputed, and deeply personal. Men may be paid by weight of coal cut, by contract, or according to local arrangements shaped by owners, managers, unions, and custom. Arguments over scales, deductions, safety rules, and tools can become arguments over dignity. A miner does not simply sell strength. He sells skill, nerve, judgment, and the willingness to work beneath a roof that may not always keep its promises. There is still debate among scholars over how to balance the story of mining communities. Were they unusually close and solidaristic because danger and isolation bound people together? Or were they also fractured by class, religion, gender, ethnicity, skill, and company control? The answer, inconveniently for anyone craving simplicity, is both. You see neighbourly kindness in shared meals, borrowed coal, and women caring for one another during illness. You also see tensions over wages, respectability, migration, drinking, chapel attendance, union loyalty, and who gets the better house nearer the main road. Community is not a postcard. It is a crowded room with love, resentment, soup, and laundry all happening at once. You pass the Miners' Institute as where lamps burn late. Inside, men read newspapers, attend lectures, debate politics, practice music, and argue with the kind of energy that suggests nobody has ever truly been too tired to have an opinion. In some coal towns, self-education becomes a point of pride. Libraries, reading rooms, and workers' associations offer a way to push the mind beyond the pit. You hear pages turn, chairs scrape, and a voice reading aloud from a report. The smell here is ink, pipe smoke, damp coats, and coal dust carried in from the street. A quirky detail warms the scene. Many coal communities became famous for brass bands, and colliery bands sometimes performed with astonishing polish after long work days underground. Imagine it men who spent hours in darkness lifting instruments to their mouths and filling a town square with marches, hymns, and bright, disciplined sound. The cornet glints under lamplight. The tuba breathes deeply. Children gather near the front. For a little while, the coal town hears itself not as coughing, clanking, and scraping, but as music. Honestly, coal dust producing a brass band is one of history's stranger acts of emotional compensation. You move from the town to a city neighbourhood where coal is burned in thousands of domestic grates. Here the smoke is denser, layered over rooftops and alleyways. Chimneys crowd the skyline like blackened fingers. The streets smell of soot, fog, frying fat, stale beer, drains, and warm bread from a baker's oven. On a damp day, smoke mixes with mist and hangs low enough to sting the eyes. Lamps glow in halos. Horses appear as shapes first, animals second. Your coat feels wet on the outside and gritty at the cuffs. In middle-class homes, coal fires become part of comfort and respectability. A bright grate in the parlour signals warmth, order, and hospitality. Fire irons shine if someone has polished them. A coal scuttle stands nearby, sometimes decorative, because even fuel apparently deserves furniture. The hearth is a social centre, but it demands work carrying coal, laying the fire, clearing ash, sweeping soot, blacking grates, and keeping carpets from surrendering entirely. Servants, wives, daughters, and hired cleaners perform much of this labour. The cosy glow has a backstage, and the backstage is dusty. You sit near one of these parlour fires, the heat touches your shins almost too strongly, while the back of your neck remains cool. The flame burns blue and orange around the coal. It gives off a faint sulphurous smell beneath the scent of polish and tea. A clock ticks on the mantel. Cups clink. Someone reads aloud. Outside, wheels hiss over wet stones. It is peaceful, but not pure. The warmth is built from excavation, transport, smoke, and the quiet labour of keeping dirt out of sight. For poorer households, coal can be both necessity and burden. Buying fuel in small quantities often costs more per unit than buying in bulk, but bulk requires storage and spare money, so the poor may pay dearly for little baskets of warmth. In cold weather, families gather in one room to save fuel. Beds may feel damp, blankets may smell faintly of smoke. Children dress close to the fire in the morning, turning slowly to warm each side like cautious little pieces of toast. There is humour in that image, yes, but also the plain fact of cold. Mining labour also carries the risk of injury, disease, and sudden loss. The community learns rituals of waiting. A whistle at the wrong time changes the air. A messenger in the street can make conversation die at once. Women listen for footsteps, rumours, official words. Chapels fill for funerals. Collection boxes pass from hand to hand. Mutual aid societies and unions grow not from theory alone, but from practical fear. When danger is shared, organisation becomes a way of keeping grief from swallowing families whole. You feel the texture of that organisation in meeting halls and kitchens. Voices rise over wage cuts, hands lift in votes. Men argue, strike or compromise. Women stretch food, manage credit, support picket lines, challenge officials, and carry the emotional weight of the households under pressure. Labour history is not only speeches by men at a platform, though they certainly do enjoy a platform. It is also bread counted carefully, children kept warm, debts negotiated, and neighbours deciding whether solidarity can outlast hunger. By night, the coal town settles into a dark shimmer. Fires glow behind curtains. The pithead stands against the sky, its wheels still or turning slowly. Ash buckets wait by doors. Somewhere, a band practices a hymn, the notes drifting over wet roofs with surprising tenderness. Somewhere else, a miner coughs in his sleep. The air remains smoky, but the houses are warm. That is the bargain. People live inside comfort and damage, wages and danger, pride and exhaustion, community and control. You pause beneath a street lamp and watch soot drift through the light like black snow. It lands on your sleeve so softly you barely feel it. Around you, the town breathes through chimneys, lungs, doors, and grates. Coal is not only an industrial fuel here, it is domestic weather. It is the dust on the sill, the heat in the kettle, the wage in the envelope, the song from the bandstand, the argument in the meeting hall, and the tired body at the table. The Black Rock has entered the most private rooms of life, where history is not announced by engines, but by a hand reaching for the coal scuttle before the fire goes low. You enter a city at dusk, just as the old day loosens its grip and the new electric night begins to wake. The streets are damp from a passing shower, and the paving stones hold tiny reflections of windows, lamps, wheels, and passing feet. Horse hooves clop in the distance. A tram bell gives a bright little ring. Somewhere, a shopkeeper pulls down an awning with a flap of wet canvas, while above the street, wires stretch from pole to pole like dark lines drawn across the sky. The air smells of rain, soot, hot metal, river mud, and the faint sweetness of gas still leaking from older lamps. Then, one by one, electric lights bloom. They do not flicker like candles or flutter like gas flames. They shine with a steadier confidence, white and almost unreal, turning shop windows into small theatres. A jeweller's display glitters. A pharmacy sign glows. Faces passing beneath the light appear suddenly clear, then vanish again into shadow. You feel the evening change texture around you. Night is no longer a curtain falling over the city. It is becoming a room someone has decided to keep open. Coal is behind this new brightness, not in the parlour grate, not in the locomotive tender, but in the power station, where black fuel is burned to boil water, drive turbines or engines, and generate electricity. The light touching the wet street has begun as heat, pressure, rotation, and magnetic force. It is a long journey from a lump of coal to a glowing bulb, and yet the city accepts it as if light from a wire is perfectly normal. Humans are very quick to call yesterday's miracle a utility bill, A mainstream historical fact fits neatly into this evening. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw the rise of coal-fired electric power stations, which supplied lighting, tramways, factories, offices, and homes through expanding electrical grids. Thomas Edison's Pearl Street Station in New York began operating in 1882 and used coal-fired steam engines to generate electricity for nearby customers. It served only a small district at first, but it pointed toward a future in which power could be produced centrally and distributed outward through cables, meters, switches, and bills that nobody enjoyed receiving. You walk toward a generating station near the river. It rises from the waterfront in brick, iron, glass, and smoke. Tall chimneys lift into the darkening sky. Coal barges sit low in the water beside it, their cargoes black and wet, smelling of mineral dust and river slime. Inside, the building hums with force. The sound is deeper than a workshop and smoother than a mill. Boilers rumble, turbines whine, dynamos spin, belts, shafts, valves, gauges, and switchboards form an indoor landscape of controlled energy. The floor vibrates gently through the soles of your shoes. Heat presses against your cheeks near the boilers, then fades as you pass into a cooler hall where polished instruments gleam under electric lamps. The touch of the handrail is warm in one place, cold in another, sticky with oil where too many hands have gripped it. You smell coal smoke, steam, insulation, hot copper, machine oil, and damp clothing. The atmosphere is almost ceremonial, as if the city has built a temple to invisible motion. Workers move carefully among the machinery. A stoker feeds a furnace. An engineer studies a gauge. A switchboard operator stands before rows of levers and dials, watching electricity become something measured, directed, and sold. The labour is quieter than hammering iron, but the danger has not vanished. Steam pressure, fire, moving machinery, and high voltage all carry their own manners of warning. A careless hand near the wrong contact can turn the body into a very brief electrical argument, which is not recommended. Electric light changes how people use time. Shops stay open longer. Streets feel safer in some district, or at least more visible, which is not always the same thing. Offices stretch their hours. Theatres glitter. Newspapers can be printed, moved, and read in an expanding nighttime economy. In homes that can afford connection, the electric bulb begins replacing smoky lamps and fussy flames. You stand in a middle-class sitting room where a switch clicks, and light fills the space instantly. No match, no wick, no soot on the glass chimney. The room seems cleaner, sharper, almost modern enough to be slightly smug. Yet the cleanliness is partial. The smoke has moved. Instead of thousands of little flames indoors, there may be one great furnace district by the river, or several power stations breathing soot over neighbourhoods downwind. This becomes one of coal's clever disguises. Electricity can make the room feel cleaner while the city's edge grows dirtier. The hand that flips the switch does not feel the coal dust at the plant, the ash in the yard, or the smoke settling over poorer streets. Distance makes consequence easier to ignore, which is one of civilization's less charming talents. Researchers still debate whether electrification first reduced urban pollution by replacing smoky domestic fuels and gaslighting, or worsened industrial emissions by expanding total energy demand and concentrating coal burning at larger sites. The answer depends on place, period, technology, and what kind of pollution is being measured. The story refuses to behave like a tidy moral lesson. Electric light could clear one room while darkening another sky. It could improve safety and comfort while deepening dependence on mines, boilers, wires, and fossil fuel. A quirky detail glows from the early age of electricity. Some people found electric light unsettlingly bright, even ghostly. Shops and theatres loved the sparkle, but critics complained that the new illumination was harsh, unnatural, or socially exposing. Gaslight had shadows, candlelight forgave wrinkles, electric light rude little angel that it was, showed dust, pores, bad paint, and tired faces with democratic cruelty. There were even jokes that electric lighting made romance harder because everything became too visible. Progress, apparently, had no dimmer switch at first. You step outside again, where electric street lamps cast pools of pale light on the pavement. Beneath them, modern city life gathers. A newspaper boy calls headlines. A tram hums along its track, sparks flashing briefly overhead. A woman pauses by a shop window, gloved fingers resting on the glass. The surface feels cold, faintly vibrating from traffic. Inside the display, fabrics shine with colours made brighter by electricity. Light becomes commerce. It draws the eye, extends shopping hours, advertises abundance, and persuades people that the city is awake because it wants to be, not because the power station is swallowing coal by the ton. Coal-fired electricity also reaches factories in new forms. Instead of every workplace depending on its own steam engine, electric motors can drive individual machines. Power becomes more flexible, more divisible, less tied to belts and shafts running overhead. The factory floor can be rearranged. Machines can be placed with new logic. Noise changes from the thunder of central mechanical drive to a more varied chorus of motors, fans, presses, and conveyors. You hear the difference, a buzz here, a whir there, a sudden clatter from the machine starting on command. Energy is no longer only a great rotating spine. It becomes a nervous system. In the countryside, electrification arrives unevenly. Some towns glow while nearby farms still depend on lanterns, animal muscle, and hard daylight. You stand on a rural road and look toward a distant town where the sky is faintly lit above the rooftops. In the farmhouse beside you, a kerosene lamp smells sharp and oily. The table is warm beneath your hand from a bowl of soup. The contrast feels almost unfair. Modernity does not spread like sunrise. It arrives through investment, politics, wires, profit, and geography, leaving some places bright and others waiting. At the power station, ash becomes its own landscape. Coal does not disappear when burned. It leaves cinders, clinker, fly ash, soot, and gases. Workers shovel ash into carts or sluice it away. Fine particles settle on nearby yards and window sills. Rain turns ash heaps into grey paste. The smell is dry, alkaline, and faintly metallic. Your shoe sinks slightly into the powder at the edge of a disposal ground, and a pale dust puffs up around the sole. The black rock has become grey residue, less dramatic but no less real. By the early 20th century, some scientists, physicians, reformers, and city officials increasingly connect smoke with illness, damaged buildings, poor visibility, and dirty urban living. Anti-smoke campaigns grow in industrial cities. They are not always radical. Many are practical, civic, and sometimes class-conscious, pushed by people who want cleaner laundry, clearer air, better health, and nicer stone buildings that do not look as if they have been scolded by a chimney. Smoke abatement becomes a field of measurements, rules, improved furnaces, taller stacks, and public arguments over cost. Climate is not yet the central public language for most of this period, but the groundwork of understanding is being laid. Scientists investigate the atmosphere, gases, heat trapping, and the role of carbon dioxide. Coal smoke is first experienced as soot in the eyes, grime on buildings, and breath made difficult. The larger planetary cost takes longer to become visible, partly because it is spread across time and distance. A foggy street announces itself immediately. A changing climate whispers through averages, seasons, oceans, ice, storms, and crops. Humans are much better at noticing a dirty collar than a shifting global system, which is unfortunate but very human. You pause near a river at night. The The power station windows glow amber. The chimney smoke rises, then bends with the wind. Reflections tremble in the black water. Across the bridge, electric signs flicker and shine. The city looks magical, and in a way it is. Coal has been transformed into illumination, movement, communication, refrigeration, cinema, elevators, streetcars, and the promise that darkness can be negotiated. But the magic has a bill written in ash, labour, smoke, and carbon. The atmosphere is beautiful and uneasy. You hear the low hum of cables, the slap of river water against stone, the far bell of a tram, the soft hiss of rain beginning again. You smell wet soot and hot brick cooling in the night air. The railing beneath your palm is slick with moisture. Above you, the sky is not fully dark. City light stains the clouds from below, while smoke softens their edges. Coal has turned night electric, but it has also hidden part of itself behind the switch. The glowing bulb seems weightless. The power behind it is not. It carries mines, furnaces, turbines, ash heaps, scientific warnings, reform meetings, and the slow discovery that energy always comes from somewhere. You watch the city shimmer under its new artificial stars, and the beauty is real. So is the cost. In the gentle hum of the electric night, both truths remain lit. You stand at the edge of an open cast coal mine, where the land has been carved into wide terraces under a pale afternoon sky. It does not feel like a tunnel. It feels like a giant amphitheatre built for machines, silence, and regret. The pit drops away in broad steps of grey, brown, and black, each level marked by haul roads where trucks crawl slowly like insects with very expensive tyres. Wind moves across the exposed earth and carries the smell of dust, diesel, wet clay, and crushed stone. The sound is low and steady, engines grind in the distance. A reversing alarm beeps with the stubborn cheerfulness of a tiny bird that has chosen the least poetic possible song. Somewhere, a bucket wheel or excavator bites into the seam. Metal scrapes earth. Rock breaks. A conveyor turns with a dry, rattling rhythm. You feel grit against your cheeks and taste mineral dust when you breathe through your mouth. Coal is no longer hidden in a cottage basket or glowing in a parlour grate. It lies exposed in enormous black bands, measured by surveyors, loaded by machines, and entered into databases with all the romance of a spreadsheet. By the 20th and 21st centuries, coal remains one of the major fuels for electricity, steel making, and heavy industry. Yet its place in many countries begins to shrink under pressure from natural gas, nuclear power, wind, solar, hydroelectricity, pollution controls, mine closures, and climate policy. This is a mainstream fact, though the pace varies sharply by nation. In some regions, coal declines quickly. In others, it stays central because it is domestic, reliable, politically protected, or tied to jobs and infrastructure too large to replace with a polite shrug. You walk along a viewing platform where a sign explains the geology. The metal rail is cold under your fingers. Below, a truck carries coal toward a processing plant. Its load is wet and dark, glistening in the light. Nearby, settling ponds reflect the sky in dull colours. The landscape has a strange honesty. Nothing is hidden. The cut earth shows its layers like pages torn from a book. It is beautiful in a severe way, and damaged in a way that does not need exaggeration. Coal's decline is not a simple disappearance. It is a slow rearrangement of economies, landscapes, and identities. You enter a town where the mine is closed. The winding tower still stands, preserved as heritage, its wheel motionless against the clouds. The streets are quieter now. The old Miners' Institute has become a community centre. A supermarket occupies land where wagons once stood. The air smells of rain, cut grass, frying food from a takeaway, and faint coal smoke from one house that still keeps an old fire. Memory remains in bricks, photographs, jokes, songs, and the way older people pause when they hear a certain whistle in a film. A former miner sits in a kitchen with a mug of tea, hands wrapped around it for warmth. His fingers are broad, knuckled, and scarred. The tablecloth is clean. The window glass catches the grey light. He tells you about the pit not as a museum object, but as a place with sounds, tempers, skills, and friendships. He remembers the smell of lamp oil, wet boots, tobacco, machine grease, and coal dust in hair that no bath quite defeated. He remembers danger, but also pride. He remembers wages, arguments, strikes, jokes, funerals, and the odd comfort of knowing exactly who you were because the town knew too. There is a scholarly disagreement here that still carries emotional weight. Some historians and economists describe the retreat from coal as a necessary energy transition driven by pollution, cost, technology, and climate risk. Others emphasize that mine closures often arrived with poor planning, leaving communities to absorb unemployment, illness, identity loss, and political anger. These views do not cancel each other. They stand together awkwardly, like strangers under the same umbrella. Coal can be harmful to keep burning and painful to leave behind. History is rarely kind enough to offer clean choices wrapped in ribbon. You travel to a power station at the edge of a river. Its cooling towers rise like enormous concrete vases, pale and almost graceful until you remember what they're doing. Steam drifts upward in soft white columns. Coal arrives by rail or conveyor. Inside, boilers burn with controlled intensity. Turbines spin, and electricity flows outward toward homes, hospitals, servers, factories, streetlights, and phone chargers resting beside beds. The building hums with responsibility. A city may not think of it often, but a failed power supply reminds everyone very quickly that modern comfort has a backbone. The smell near the coal yard is dry and dusty, with a sulphur edge after rain. Your shoes crunch over gravel. A conveyor belt moves overhead, carrying black fuel in a steady stream. Workers wear helmets, masks, and reflective clothing. They check instruments instead of reading lamp flames. They monitor emissions, ash handling, boiler performance, and safety systems. Coal labour has changed shape. It is still physical in places, still risky in places, but increasingly surrounded by sensors, regulations, control rooms, and screens glowing blue in dim industrial offices. A quirky modern tidbit hides in the ash's coal combustion byproducts. Especially fly ash have been used in concrete as a road base, wallboard, and other construction materials. So the remains of burned coal may end up inside bridges, buildings, and highways. It is a strange little afterlife. A plant that grew in a prehistoric swamp becomes coal. The coal becomes electricity. The ash becomes part of a road, and then someone drives over it while complaining about traffic. The universe has a dry sense of humour. Coal's environmental costs gather from many directions. There is local air pollution, including particulates and sulfur compounds. There is land disturbance from mining. There is acid mine drainage in some regions, where water reacts with exposed minerals and carries acidity and metals into streams. There are ash ponds and waste piles that require long care, and there is carbon dioxide released when coal burns, part of the wider human addition of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. The issue is not one stain, but many stains layered together. You stand beside a stream below an abandoned mine. The water runs orange over stones where minerals have coloured the bed. It smells faintly metallic. The bank is soft under your boots. Grass grows in patches, but the scene feels wounded. In other places, restoration has worked better. Former mines become wetlands, forests, parks, solar farms, lakes, or wildlife areas. You walk across one reclaimed site where young birch trees tremble in the wind. Bees move among wildflowers. A lark rises from the grass, singing as if the land has not carried machinery, spoil, and argument in its bones. Recovery is possible, though never as simple as planting a few trees and declaring everyone emotionally healed. Energy transition arrives unevenly, almost like weather crossing mountains. In one country, coal plants close and smokestacks are demolished. In another, new units operate because electricity demand is growing. In one town, former mine workers retrain for construction, logistics, offshore wind, or environmental remediation. In another, people feel abandoned by distant decision makers who speak warmly of the future but rarely visit the street where the shops have gone empty. You hear this tension in community meetings, policy speeches, family kitchens, and election campaigns. Coal is now not only fuel, it is memory, livelihood, grievance, security, and argument. You walk through a museum built at a former colliery. Children press buttons to make models move. A guide lowers his voice as he describes the darkness underground. Helmets hang on a wall. Old lamps sit behind glass. The air smells of polished floors, dust, wool coats, and faint machine oil preserved in old equipment. A recorded voice plays the sound of a cage descending. It is theatrical, but it works. For a moment, visitors become quiet. They understand, not fully, but enough to feel the weight of the earth and the people beneath it. Outside, the gift shop sells coal carvings, postcards, mugs, and little polished lumps marketed as keepsakes. There is something touching and absurd about turning industrial hardship into a souvenir, small enough to fit in a pocket, yet objects help people hold memory. A black fragment on a mantle can mean family, town, danger, warmth, politics, or pride. It can mean a grandfather's hands. It can mean a vanished wage. It can mean the glow of a fire on a winter evening when the room felt safe. The final face of coal is not only decline, it is reckoning. You stand in the dim light of a modern city where electricity still flows, though its sources are changing. Some power comes from wind turning over hills and seas, some from sunlight falling on panels, some from water, uranium, gas, biomass, batteries, and grids managed by invisible streams of data. Coal remains part of the mix in many places, but its old certainty has weakened. The black rock that once seemed like destiny now looks more like inheritance, powerful, costly, and difficult to put down gently. And now the night softens around you. The machines grow distant. The coal heaps sink into shadow. A quiet wind moves through grass on reclaimed ground, brushing seed heads together with a sound like whispered paper. You breathe slowly, tasting only cool air and rain on leaves, far away. A town light glows in a window, steady and small. The long story settles, not erased, not forgotten, but resting. The black rock returns to darkness in your mind, no longer roaring, only warm with memory, like an ember covered carefully in ash. You let the image fade. The rail is cool beneath your palm. The sky lowers. The earth is still. Your thoughts loosen, soften, and drift like smoke thinning into evening.